Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Students of the Word. This is session number 65, and today we return to paragraph 11, right? It's 11 now, I think, where we've moved from talking about our guts to talking about our hearts and minds, and our relationship with God. And so we were looking through his words, his terminology here, trying to make sure that we're understanding all the words. But we didn't get a chance to put them all together. And how they're going together is fairly complicated. So let's, and it's important because this is the crazy thing about First John, right? This is how you know that First John is doing some really interesting things, right? Because within the space of a few verses, we go from the part of First John that sounds to so many people that like it is condemning all of us to not even be Christians at all, right? By saying that if you ever sin, it just proves you've never even met God. So like that sounds so extreme on the one side that again, that a lot of people don't even really study First John very carefully. At least that's what I found. A lot of people just kind of avoid this epistle because they read that passage, they're like, he can't mean what it seems like he's meaning, but I don't know what else to make of it. Um, or they kind of wave their hands on it and move on, which is kind of the same thing as not reading it. And but now we come just basically a few verses later. I mean, it's a paragraph and a half down the road from that earlier difficult section. And here we have one of the most famously extravagant promises made about the granting of prayers, that we can have anything that we want if we keep his commandments. Again, what sounds, as I said, one is tempted to read it almost like a bargain, right? If you keep God's commandments, then you can have anything that you want. Um, sounds like a sweet deal, right? Is it too good to be true? So this is the part that we're at and we want to be looking at here today. But as I said, you've got this what seems extremely bad news for Christians in one paragraph, and then what seems like way too good news for Christians on the other side. So there's First John for you. So let's go back to paragraph 11 and remember where we are here. Um, okay. We will know by this that we are of the truth, and will assure our heart before him. In whatever our heart, let's say our minds, because again, heart, we associate the heart with emotions, and there's no clear association between the heart and emotions. It seems primarily to be mind, um, just based on how it's used elsewhere in the New Testament. We will know by this that we are of the truth, and will assure our minds before him in whatever our mind condemns us. For God is greater than our mind and knows all things. Remember, this is our condemns us, knows against us, right? Kataganoske. Beloved, if our mind does not condemn us, we have confidence before God, and whatever we ask, we receive from him, because we keep his commandments and do the things that are pleasing in his sight. Then, of course, we get into finally, this is the commandment. So we're a little more than halfway through the epistle. We're about, what are we, 60% of the way through the epistle at this point, before he tells us what the commandment is, right? The things that he's been talking about ever since way back in paragraph 3, right? Um, but we know that we will come to know him if we keep his commandments. Right? He who says, I've come to know him and does not keep his commandments as well, but he didn't tell us what the commandments were, right? He says, I am not writing a new commandment, but an old commandment, which you've had from the beginning. Um, and he didn't explain what either one was exactly, right? So he's taken a while to get around to this whole explaining so this is his commandment is a kind of a big statement there. But still, we're not going to get there because we've got a lot to sort out here with what's going on with our minds. First, big picture, right? Big picture structure of this. we have, if our heart condemns us and if our heart does not condemn us, right? We have those two basic kind of conditions. Just as, and we've seen him pair things like this all the way through, right? Um, if we say we are in the light and love our brother, then we're in the darkness, right? But if we walk in the light, then, right, so those kinds of pairings are, he's been doing all the way through. So we've got, if our heart condemns us, let's go back to the Greek. Okay. Uh, yeah, no, I don't want to start on 21. Okay, let's start at 19. All right. Kai en tuto. And in this, we will know that we are from the truth, the child of the truth. And emprosthen, and before him, like in front of him, we will assure the mind of us that if our mind should condemn us. Okay, so we've got three things with our minds. The first thing is about assuring our minds before him. And this will be, by this we know, that is, by this we know, by paragraph 10, we know. Little children, let's not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. And in this, we know that we are of the truth and will assure our hearts before him. That seems to be, okay, so again, I know I'm going backwards, but big picture. Both of these verbs are in the future tense. We will know and we will assure. It puts it in the present tense in the English, but they're both future tense. This is how we know that in the future. So no, this is how in the future we will know that we are of the truth and we will assure our hearts. Reassure our hearts. Hang on, I'm trying to remember. I forgot Pytho here. Oh, right. Trusts, persuaded, relied. Right. Right. Even followed. Yeah. Okay. So we are going to do this to our hearts. We're going to make our hearts do this. We will. Hang on a second. Hang on. When it takes a direct object, persuade. Okay, I'm going to look at these usages again and look at which ones have direct objects. Persuading the multitude, trusting in God. Yeah. Epi. So there, if it's taken a preposition, it's not a direct object. We will persuade him. Trust in him. Again, not a direct object. Trust in. So you can use it if you use it with prepositional phrase or like with the dative, then it's in. I think it's dative. Not 100% sure. My Greek conjugation is and the declension is still not that great. But yeah, I see. Trusted in, persuaded, followed, obeyed. I can't imagine it's followed. We're not going to be following our heart or obeying our heart beforehand. I think it's persuaded. Yeah. Okay. All right. So when it's used with a direct object, it tends to be persuaded. That makes sense. Okay. So we're talking about persuading our hearts, not just like reassuring our hearts. It's okay, heart. It'll be all right. Don't worry. It's more than that. Convincing, persuading. Okay, by this, because these are things that are going to happen, right? We will know that we are of the truth and we will persuade our minds. And this is how we know in what, by loving properly, by following God's example of love, which means loving in deed and truth and not just in word. Then we will, by that, we will know that we are of the truth, and we will assure the heart of us before we persuade our hearts before him. So the persuasion is happening before him, in front of him. And as I said before, this seems a direct callback to paragraph 8, when we're not shrinking away in shame before him, in his presence, in his parousia. Okay. So then the hoti here introduces, I think this is all then explaining why do we need to persuade our minds? How do our minds come into this? Why are we persuading our minds? Oh, he's doing it again. He's Hebrewing again. You see? He's Hebrewing again. Those are the same thing. Know that you are of the truth and persuade your mind before him. That's one of those Hebrew poetry things again. I mean, to know something, to come to know something, and to persuade your mind of something those are near synonyms, right? He's expressing the same thing in the two different ways. So the reason we're talking about our cardian, our heart, our brains, as we would say, um, uh, it would, um, because we're talking about knowledge. We will know that we are of the truth, and we will persuade our minds before him that we are of the truth. Yes, yes. So what does it add when we do catch John Hebrewing like this, right? When he is thinking in these kinds of Hebrew poetry terms, then the thing to do is to like ask it the same question that you would ask of Hebrew poetry, right? Why do they repeat it? Why do they do that? What does that structure indicate, right? It's not to provide new information. It's not a list of things. When, the Psalms give us two things that are nearly synonymous with each other, it's certainly not giving us like two totally separate pieces of information. But you also can't just draw an equal sign between them and ignore it, right? Oh, that's just the same thing. Um, it approaches it from two different perspectives. It gives us two different glimpses onto the same thing. Why do the second one? Um, I think the answer seems to be the primary difference is the active role. Well, no, you can just say this a different way. Notice how persuade our minds introduces a conceptual separation between us and our own minds, which we don't get out of just the phrase, we will know that we are of the truth, right? To say you will know something is to predict a future state of your mind, right? In the future tense, I'm going to know something. At this future time, I'm going to know something. But when he talks of us persuading our minds, it separates us from our minds in theory, right? So that we are acting on our minds. Because, of course, as he's just been pointing out, no, as he hasn't pointed out yet. Okay, sorry, I forgot how far back I went to the beginning of the paragraph. As he's going to point out, our minds are going to be in opposition to us, right? Um, what we believe we know in the present, what we do know in the present, what our minds tell us about ourselves isn't necessarily true. Oh my goodness, you see how this corresponds? This corresponds back to what he's been saying from the beginning of the epistle about saying one thing and another thing being true. It works the other way around also. That is, it isn't just that we can say, oh yeah, I have fellowship with God. I'm good. And yet walk in darkness, right? That is the first emphasis that he has. The first way in which our word, our words and our tongues can be different from our lived realities, right? In that thing that we modern English speakers would call hypocrisy. I say that because I think clearly when Jesus coined that particular metaphor, um, I don't think he meant precisely the same thing by it. Remember, sorry, let me not be cryptic about that. Um, Hypocrisy, it's the Greek word. It's about an actor, like a stage actor, being like a stage actor, and seems to me clear looking at Jesus's accusations of hypocrisy that it's not just a matter of like saying one thing and doing another. Exactly, it's about posturing in a particular way. Um, there is what we would call hypocrisy involved with that, of course. But again, I don't think the words have exactly the same force. The way that we use the word in modern English and the way that Jesus was using it. Anyway, point is, um, that element that what we modern people would call hypocrisy, that is claiming one thing but having it not be true under having our actions belie the thing that we say, um saying we have fellowship and yet walking in darkness. That's his first target, and that's the pattern of almost all of those initial things, right? If you say you're walking in the light but you hate your brother, if you say that you've come to know God and yet you don't keep his commandments, right? um that's the first emphasis, but there's another problem too. um the other problem can be, if you are a child of God, if you are of the truth, but your mind tells you you're not, right? Um, if your mind tells you, yeah, you don't deserve this kind of love that God has shown by calling you a child of God, um, your mind is going to condemn you. It's gonna know against you. Your heart and mind is going to take persuading. It's going to take persuading that you really are. When you stand in the presence of God, you're likely to want to shrink away in shame, right? That is probable, right? Um, but that's why the verb he's put into the future tense here, paralleling with we will know that we are of the truth, is we will persuade our hearts. We will persuade our minds in front of him. It's gonna it's gonna take some convincing. Um, in both directions, not to claim what we want to say we have and we don't have, as he covered first, or here, um, to stand up against that katagonos that our mind is going to do, the knowing against us. Okay, so we will know that we are of the truth, out of the truth, and we will persuade the hearts of us before him. Hoti, so that, because if our heart, if our mind should katagonoske us, should speak against us, God is greater than our hearts. And he gnoske panta, he knows all things, such as what he promised, what he observed. He knows. Um, Remember, we don't know. It's not yet been revealed to us what we shall be, but God knows. It's part of the panta that God knows. Beloved, if our hearts should not condemn us, me katagonoske, paresian, we have confidence. I remind myself about paresian. Freedom. Yes. Boldness. Yes, this was the word that we had before. Um, again, back in that paragraph 8 context, we have confidence, boldness towards God. And this is where we got into um yeah, Randall, I got myself into all manner of problems here last week. And whatever if we might ask, whatever we should ask in the subjunctive, we receive present indicative sense from him. And the asking and the receiving are both from him, presumably. Holte, because we keep the commandments of him and the things pleasing enopion, the pleasing in his sight. We do. Okay. The first thing I'm trying to keep a hold on is the big picture. The big picture. So we've got the three things about our hearts, right? We're going to persuade our hearts before him. Thing number one. Because there are the two other instances. Our hearts may kataginoske us or they may not. If our hearts kataginoske us, in case of kataginoske, do this, right? Remember this, that God is greater than our heart and knows all things. In the event that there is not kataginoske by our hearts, by our minds, then we get verse 21. Then we have confidence before God. Those are the two alternatives. The two things I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time because I'm struggling with two things simultaneously. The first thing I'm struggling with is just the pattern, just trying to understand just to parse the sentence, right? I'm just trying to follow his syntax, and it's hard here. Um, how does this actually work as an if-then proposition? Because it seems to be, right? Um, it's like we could set up a flow chart, right? We will need to persuade our hearts before him. What's that going to look like? Well, um, does your heart kataganoske you? Yes or no? If yes, then this. If no, then that. That's what it looks like it's doing. But I'm having a hard time really really making sense of that when I try to do that. And the second thing is just I'm not 100% sure that I properly understand what it means for our hearts to condemn us, for our hearts to kataganoske us, to know against us. Um, and I realize what makes me realize I don't understand that. 20 feels like smooth sailing. If our minds should know against us, God is greater than our mind, and he knows all things. Okay, so whatever our own minds put before us of reasons why we're unworthy of God's love, it doesn't matter because God is greater than our heart. God overrules it. Statement of grace. Okay, no problem. At least I feel like I understand kataganoske in that sense, right? Um, my heart telling me I do not deserve God's love. Okay. My Protestant upbringing is comfortable with that. But then when I get to 21, beloved, if the heart of us should not condemn us. And I'm like, under what circumstances is my heart not going to condemn me? Like, seriously, are we likely to stand before God and be like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah. Um, I mean, am I really, surely he can't be suggesting that we're going to stand before God and be what? Just like excited to show God a report card? I mean, when we look back on our lives, like that, That seems really unlikely. As John himself seemed to acknowledge when he talked about shrinking away in shame when we come into the presence. Ah, Susan has a suggestion. Susan's suggestion is it's not an if then. It's not an either or. It's sequential. Oh, let's see. That would change things, Susan. We will persuade we will persuade our hearts before him, in front of him, that so let's forget if for a second. What do we do with Anne? Yeah, it's like it's just if, man. It's just if. A particle showing a statement is conditional, referring to a condition extending to its spin-off possibilities that happen if the condition is actualized. Okay. Okay. So the first one would could still easily be a straight up if. If our hearts should condemn us, God is greater then God is greater than our hearts. Now tell me about this hoti, because we got our two hotis here. Okay, kai en tuto, we will know hoti. That's just that. We will know that. What will we know? We will know that. Um, we will know that we are of the, so this is just introducing the noun clause, the thing that we know. Sure. Um, and we get another hoti, right? As we will know, what do we know? That we are of the truth, and before him we will persuade our hearts. Hoti again. That because this has got to be because this one is causal. Yes, this one that makes sense. This is not just a that. Yes, by this we will know. What will we know? That's what we will know. That we are of the truth, and we will assure we're going to persuade our hearts before us. Wait, hang on. Why do we need to persuade our hearts? Well, because our hearts are going to kataganoske us, man. That's why. Yes, because if our mind kataganoskes us, what do we have to convince it of then? That God is greater than the heart of us. And Kai, he knows, he gnoske panta. Right. Okay. Now we keep going. Agapetoi, beloved. And if again, if the heart of us should not condemn us, we have confidence towards God. Yeah, I'm with you, Susan. I totally see it. It's not just two alternatives. The entire first if, if our hearts condemn us, then God is greater than our hearts. That's all premised on this is all an explanation of why we have to persuade our hearts. Why are we in the heart persuading business in the first place? Right? Why is there going to be this gap between us and our minds and that we're going to have to convince our minds? And the answer is because our heart's gonna kataganoske us, and we're gonna have to remember that God is greater than our hearts and knows all things. And so if we get there, right? If we've persuaded our hearts, having gone through the heart persuading process, should this all occur, should this, when this happens, then, which is when the heart of us no longer kataganoske us. So this is not saying if our heart should not make a peep. This is after our heart has been persuaded, has been instructed. When that happens, then we will have boldness towards God. And whatever we might ask, we receive from him. Hoti, because no. Oh my, what if that's not because? Yeah, so Susan, on the one hand, you're completely right. Once we get here, when we're on the other side of the whole Kataganoske heart issue, right? When we now have boldness towards God, then we will receive what we ask. But hang on. The thing that makes it sound like a crude transaction is the because, is this hoti right here. But what if that one isn't because? It could easily be that. And whatever we might ask, we receive from him, that the commandments of him we keep, and the things pleasing before him we do. That is, what we ask, we're going to receive. What we're going to ask from him when our heart is not kataganoskeing us is the resources with which to keep his commandments and do the things that please him. Not because. We don't receive it because we've earned it by keeping his commandments and doing the things that pleased him. We receive these things that and what the problem with that reading that I'm doing right there is we'd need the subjunctive and we don't have it. What I'm saying would be we receive it from him that we might keep his commandments and that we might do the things pleasing to him. It would be conditional and therefore subjunctive, and it isn't. But I'm not sure that the force of it is actually different. Um, yeah, exactly. Randall's saying Hina would definitely take the subjunctive, but he's not so sure about Hoti. He says Hoti in a sense like so that. Hina would be so that, right? Um, yeah. But I was saying it's the key here is the tense. Keep and do. Present tense, not past tense. That is, it's not because we kept the commandments of him and because we did the things that were pleasing to him. That would suggest the kind of a because that would suggest that sort of a sequential causality, right? Because I kept your commandments, hook me up with some of that, whatever I might ask for, right? I did this, and so now you do that. Um, but that isn't what he says. Because we keep the commandments and because we do the things that are pleasing before him. And so it's still the same sense that I was just describing. It's not phrased as that same way. We receive from him because we keep his commandments. Yes. What we receive from him is for the keeping of his commandments in the present tense. I mean, that's that lambanomen, receive, terumen, keep, and poiomen, do, are all in the present tense, and none of them feel like they should be. You see what I mean? It feels like the first one should be future. Whatever we ask, we will receive. In fact, that's how it's often said. They translate it this way? No. Present tense, verse 22. Whatever we ask, we receive. And receive from him, present tense still, NIV. Oh, yeah, wait, I didn't know more. Hang on. Yeah. Sorry. I didn't do the other ones yet. I forgot to include the other ones. Anyway, um, I feel like when it's paraphrased, people put the future tense. Whatever we ask, we will receive. But anyway, it's present tense. Whatever we ask, we receive. So this feels like it should be in the future tense. And keep and do sound like it should be in the past tense. Whatever we might ask, we will receive because we kept his commandments and did the things that pleased him. But all of them are in the present tense. Whatever we ask, we receive because we keep his commandments and do the pleasing things. That those are not, because they're all present tense, they're not causal, even though we get the because, right? They're bound together, but they're not sequential. God isn't saying, hey, keep my commandments first, and then we'll talk about whatever you might ask for, right? But if you make with the doing the things that please me, then I'll give you what you want, right? That's the transaction. In order for it to be a transaction like that, it would have to be sequential in time. These things are still connected together by the hoti, but they're not sequential in that way. And I agree, Randall, the present tense does make it sound like a general truth. This is the thing that happens. And if whatever we ask, we receive from him. So, Randall, last time I spent some time trying to figure out what exactly the aeon means in this sentence because it confuses me. Beloved, if the heart of us, if the heart of us does not condemn us when we're through that process that we just described, once the heart convincing has happened, we have boldness, present tense again. We have boldness toward God. And whatever we ask, whatever if we ask. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, Stephen, you're very right to be remembering John 14, where Jesus says, whatever you ask in my name, that will I do, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. We see these things being bound together in that statement of Jesus there as well. And Stephen says, if we're keeping Jesus' commandments, wouldn't we be asking for what would help us in that? Um, yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah. Okay. So Randall, that's I think it's kind of where we got last time that that the aeon adds um a hypothetical ever. So like the whole aeon is that's like that together makes like whatever, right? And what whole is just what, right? And what if we ask would be idiomatically whatever we ask. Um, yeah, that was what I was kind of thinking before. The thing that was tripping me up originally is that we've had so many other aeons here, including one earlier in this sentence, that I was like, and of course, then the one up over here, in the, so we got them earlier in this sentence and then previously in the last sentence. So, so yeah, um, but that makes all kinds of sense. Um, whole aeon itomen. What, whatever it is that we ask. Um, okay. Yes. Uh, okay. Huh, so aeon doesn't always mean if in Koine. Well, I'm gonna roll with it. We'll watch it and we'll learn more as we see it. Okay. Um, this is making much more sense. Whatever we might ask, whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep the commandments of him and do the pleasing things. And that those two things are explicitly connected together. Receiving whatever we ask and keeping his commandments and doing the things that please him. Especially because, Susan, back to your excellent point before, all of this is post persuading of our hearts. More than that, it's post being in the presence of God. Notice all this has been constant through this, right? Um, we're persuading our hearts before him, in front of him, and prosthen, in front of God. We're in front of God, convincing our hearts. Um, and we talk about being judged by God, right? God is being greater than our heart. His judgment is gonna overrule our hearts. So we're talking about being in front of God. We're talking about being judged by God, hugenosque panta. And then um, we're talking about having confidence, having boldness towards God, using the same word, boldness, paresian, that he used back in paragraph 8 when he was talking about how we will act, how we can act in his parousia, in his presence. And then again, we get the reference to it. Whatever we ask, we receive because we keep the commandments of him and the things pleasing in his sight we do. So the enopion also is a right in front of God thing. So all of this is post post Perugia. That is at this is being in the presence of God stuff. No, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean I don't mean that to sound like I'm saying everything he's saying here is only relevant, after the second coming or something like that. Um, yeah, but this being in front of God, being in God's sight, having boldness before him, persuading your heart in front of him. Notice how it connects. Um, Whoever has the life of the world and sees his brother or sister have need and closes his guts against him, how does the love of God abide in him? Little children, let's not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. When we see before us, when the having need of our brother is in our sight, right? Is in front of us, we can't close our guts against them. Instead, we need to love in deed and in truth. And by this we will know that we are of the truth and will persuade our hearts in front of him. So that shift from how we act towards our brother when our brother is in front of us, taking physical action instead of merely, you know, wishing our brother well in theory. It's about what we actually do, the in front of us thing, right? Um, and then it immediately segues to our being in front of God. And of course, I can't help but remember Jesus' sayings about, you know, if you have done this to the least of these, you've done it unto me. Um, the way that he is juxtaposing at the end of paragraph 10, our being confronted with the physical needs of our brothers. And he juxtaposes that immediately to us being confronted by God himself, right? It seems to be how he's sort of turning things. Because here's one of the other things that is making me think of this. Again, I'm thinking about tenses, right? It sounds, verse 19 sounds as if he's pivoting from the present to the future. If we do this thing in the present, love our brothers and sisters in word and deed. Or sorry, no, I combined them in deed and in truth, right? Rather than in word and in tongue. If we do that in the present tense, then in the future, we will know that we are of the truth and will persuade our hearts, right? He shifts right to the future tense at the beginning of this paragraph. So again, the first indication would seem to be that he's saying, if this happens now, then this will happen later. Um, but then he shifts right back into the present tense, as we've been talking about. If our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence before God. And whatever we ask, we do receive because we keep and do. All of it present tense, right? Do we have any non-present tense in 21? We've got subjunctive, got some subjunctive and indicative, but it's all present tense. Yeah, it's all present tense. Um, Randall, tell me more. Randall's suggesting it's important that there's the absence of a conjunction in verse 21. Tell me what you mean. What conjunction would you expect? Do you mean I mean, what seems to me really clear there, the clearest rhetorical signal that he gives is the interjection, beloved, right? And it's, by the way, Susan, that more than anything else that convinces me that you are right. When he addresses them as beloved, based upon previous patterns, I think we can conclude that he's about to reveal something great to them, right? He's going to draw their attention to something really awesome. Beloved, let me tell you about what happens when that mind convincing part is over, right? Here's what's going to happen. Here's what that looks like. Um, yeah, okay, right. Randall, yeah, a lack of a Kai or anything. Yes, yes. Um, right. Instead of stringing it together with a Kai, say, um, he pauses for the direct address. What is this? Vocative? Yep, vocative. Vocative, which just means a form of direct address. Beloved, I'm talking to you. Beloved, if the heart of us should condemn us. Yeah. Yep. Um, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think replacing it with a Kai. Okay, so I see what you're saying. Um, right, right. As Randall says, John likes to use Kai a lot, the and, but he doesn't do that here. Um, and you're thinking that has something to do with the change in the tense. Aha, I see. If he were still trucking along, so in 19 and 20, he's telling us the future tense thing, right? By this we will know that is if we love our brothers in deed and truth. By this, in this, we will know that we are of the truth, out of the truth, and it will, and will, and we know that we will convince, persuade our heart, our mind before Him in whatever our heart speaks against us, knows against us. For God is greater than our heart and knows all things. Now the shift, beloved. If he had just said Kai there instead, he could have done, right? Um, we know by this that we are of the truth and will assure our hearts before him. Kai, right? Hoti, right? That. Whatever our heart condemns us, for God is greater than our heart and knows all things. Kai, and if our heart does not condemn us, we will have confidence before God. It would be continuing that idea, right? When these conjunctions happen at the beginning of sentences, essentially, right? It's a direct way to say this flows, this continues to flow logically from what happened before. This is part of the same idea, right? But by not only not doing the conjunction at all, not saying Kai or Hoti at the beginning of verse 21, but instead pausing and doing that vocative address, breaking the frame and speaking to us directly, beloved. If our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence before God. He shifts and is now bringing this all into the present tense. Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. It's like the beginning of the beloved. It's like one of the things it does is say, guys, do you realize what this means? This is the situation. Once the heart persuasion is done and we can get our hearts to stop kataganoskeing us, right? Once you get your heart to shut up, because God has proclaimed that we are his children and God is greater than our hearts and knows all things, right? Beloved, if once we get there, do you realize what this means? We have boldness in front of God. Worth looking at. I've been referring back to it, but worth looking at again. Um, Abide in him so that when he is revealed, we may have boldness and not shrink away from him in shame in his presence, in his parousia. So notice this is a abide in him so that it's a reason to abide in him, right? You should abide in him so that this will happen, so that when he shall be revealed, then we will have confidence and not shrink away in shame in his presence, right? But now he's saying, beloved, once we square our minds, right? Once we submit our minds to God's superior knowledge about us and tell it to shut up, stop catagnoscating us, then we have boldness before God. It happens, right? That thing that he was talking about in more of a future sense back in paragraph 8 happens. We have confidence, we have boldness before God. And whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do the things that are pleasing in his sight. This is what loving in deed and word looks like. This is what having boldness before God looks like. This is what persuading our heart looks like. We are bold because we boldly ask things of him. And why are we bold? Because we are abiding in him. We are being who he made us to be, which is who he has declared us to be, which is his children. And so we can be bold to ask him these things. And he will give it because we keep his commandments and do the things that are pleasing in his sight. That's what we're being bold about. Because all of this is premised upon abiding in him, that he should be in us and we in him. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, yep, that makes so much more sense now. So then, hey, let's keep going. This is his commandment, that we believe in the name of his son, Jesus Christ, and love one another just as he commanded us. Okay, this is an important sentence. Let's look at the Greek. Agapetoi, okay. Uh, keep the things pleasing. Hang on. Pleasing. Uh, it is not. Oh, in Acts 6, right. When the apostles are like, it's not good for us to neglect the teaching and to wait on tables. Oh, interesting. So it's more than just like pleasing in the sense of I kind of like it. Oh, right. And we have what's his name? Is this Herod pleasing the Jews? Yeah, we only got 4 total occurrences, including the one which is much more similar from John. Right, when Jesus talks about doing the things that are pleasing to God always. Yeah. Yeah, in Acts 6, it is not reason, says the King James. But I know that how they would have said that 300 years earlier. In Middle English, they would totally say it is not meet, meet, fitting, appropriate, um, uh, acceptable, satisfactory, agreeable. Yeah. Okay. Um, okay. And this. So Scott was asking, does this refer backward to the previous statement or pave the way for the following statements? Um, Haute. What's going on there? Oh, so it's the same. This is the same word as tuta? Huh. Oh, who knew? All right. Don't explain. I don't need to know. Um, that's just feminine versus neuter. Okay. Okay. Um, so Scott and Kai Haute is a lot like I'm scrolling up to the beginning of the paragraph. Um, Kai en tuto in this, but instead it's Kai Haute and this estin Haute estin he en tole. This is the commandment. Oh, nailed it, Devora. Devora says that Coverdale's Bible does in fact say it is not meet that we should leave the word of God. Oh, yeah. Good old Coverdale. Oh, sorry, Tyndale. Tyndale, not Coverdale. Tyndale. Yep. Tyndale's original English, modernized, for the early 17th century in the court of King James. Tyndale. Sorry, not Coverdale. Um, right. Good. Randall's making the grammatical point, Scott, that helps us here. Uh, if if you do that thing, remember I've talked about this before, how John loves to do the thing that I always told my English composition students not to do, which is point vaguely back to the previous paragraph and say this, like he did in verse 18, right? Like in this we see, right? Um, when you do that, use a neuter. Randall tells me you use the neuter version of the pronoun, right? Because you're being vague. You're just waving at it, right? But this is feminine, haute, um, which um, matches commandment, right? Um, so it seems that it modifies commandment rather than pointing vaguely backwards. So this is the commandment. I think it's he's not saying that previous stuff contained the commandment, but this right here is the commandment. Um, yeah, it agrees with commandment. So yep, no, that's great. This is the commandment, his commandment, that pistus somen, we should believe. Hmm. Trust shall be done for you as you have believed. Right? Do you believe I am able to do this? Whatever you ask in prayer, believing, you shall receive. Why did you not believe him? Let's see. And you did not believe him. That is John the Baptist, I think. The prostitutes did believe him. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is the through the Gospels, the big believe word. Then why did you not believe him? That is John the Baptist. Okay. Yeah, this is all over the place. Pistuo. So I'm wanting to look at John, as I assume it's all over the place. Oh yeah. So that all might believe through him, even to those who believe in his name. Yeah, we get it three times in John 1. Yeah. Including, of course, John 3:16, whoever believes in him. Oh my goodness. He's everywhere in John 3. Right. Even Jesus is saying to the woman, believe me, the hour cometh and now is. Right. Okay. Wow. Yeah. As I suspected, this is the word John uses like 5 to 10 times per chapter in the gospel. Yikes. Okay. Uh believe, trust. Okay. So this is a commandment that we should pistusomen to onamati. Believe. What is to? Oh, is this the? Okay. That's just the definite article. Okay. Uh we should believe the name of the son of him. Those are both genitive. So the name that's dative, that's why it's translated believe in the name, because you're not if somebody like if a messenger comes and delivers a message and you believe the message, you would say, I believe the messenger, right? Like it, right. That would be accusative version, right? But if you believe in something, dative makes perfect sense. Okay. And believe in the name of the son of him. Okay. Oh, I just had it, but I didn't see it because I wasn't looking for it. I bet you when Jesus says in John 4 to the woman at the well, when he says, believe me is accusative there, right? I bet you. Rather than when he says, like, if you believe in me, that would be dative. Betcha. Okay. Um, the believe in the name of the Son of Him, Jesu Christu. All of that is genitive because it's all it's a positive, it's in a positive to Son of Him. Yeah. To the Son of Him, Jesus Christ. Jesus the Christ. Jesus the Messiah. And we should love. And boy, notice he is closing a heck of a lot of loopholes here, isn't he? Right. Um, we're talking about Jesus, not some abstract spiritual being. We're talking about Jesus, the dude, right? Who was also the Messiah and who is the Son of God as well. We talked about that. That's not something to take for granted, right? At this point. Um, I believe that Jesus is the Messiah and the Son of the living God. All of those statements of faith are contained within this commandment that we should believe in the name. Well, no, there's onomati in there too. There's name. It's not just believe in Jesus, it's believe in his name. And that's saying something else yet again. We should believe in the name. And that has to do with the divine nature as well, I think. Anyway, hi. We should love. We should. Oh, is it? Oh, I was wrong. Oh well. Believe me is in the dative too. So the believe just takes the dative, or does that mean that no? When you say believe me, you are saying believe in me. Believe in what I'm going to tell you. Would you use the accusative about the message itself? Like if somebody tells you that and you say, I don't believe that idea, I don't believe that idea, would that be accusative? Sorry, never mind. It's just a distraction. I'm just trying to understand the construction. Um, I want to make sure I'm understanding the believe construction, but it's not relevant. It's dative here, and that's totally fine. Okay. Anyway, let me not get distracted. We're almost out of time. And we should love agapomen, alelos, one another, just as he gave the commandment to us. Yeah, that doesn't sound like it's where the sentence is going. Just as he gave the commandment to us? It sounds like just as kathos. Kathos has always been just as. Like, there's this, just as, just like this other thing, right? Um, but why is this a kathos statement? He gave the commandment to us. Just as he gave the commandment to us. What is just as he gave the commandment to us? The commandment? He's thinking, this is the commandment? And P.S., this is just how the commandment was given to us. Like the way I just gave the commandment to you was just like how he gave it to us. That would make sense. Seems a little weird to say it like this. I mean, kathos, just as he gave, because otherwise, just as like we should love one another. I mean, come on. Like if you don't know this verse and somebody says, finish this sentence from First John, we should love one another just as he, you're totally going to finish that sentence with, just as he loved us or something like that, right? So, like, in other words, it sounds like it's telling us something about how we should love one another. Do you want to know how you should love one another? I'll tell you, you should love each other just like this thing that God does, right? This way that God loves or whatever. But it isn't. It's not the direction of Kathos at all. Um, yeah, I think he's framing it. It's a direct quotation. That's his quote. Those are his quotation marks. Remember, we got no punctuation, right? Um, if John were reading this, or somebody who's reading this aloud to the audience can't avail himself of air quotes, right, in order to give a nonverbal cue to the audience. So that's what he's doing, right? Kai haute estin he entole, and this is the commandment of him. This is his commandment. His commandment is that we should believe in the name of his son, Jesus Christ, and we should love one another, just as he gave the commandment to us. That's just how it was. It is exactly like that. Indirect quotation. Right. Yeah. Um, it makes me think of here endeth the lesson. Uh again, the reason they say that when reading in church, is you're giving a verbal cue, right? Um, Anything I say moving forward after this is not in the book, right? Um, I'm not I'm done I'm done quoting now, right? Um, yeah, okay. That that makes a lot of sense. Because again, we have to think that way. We have to think of the signals that he's giving. And this is a really important one. I mean, the fact that he's framing it like this is the commandment, just as he gave the commandment to us. And in between, he gives the direct quotation of the commandment. And this is huge, that we should believe in the name of the Son of Him, Jesus Christ, and we should love one another. Agapomen allelos. Um, yeah, cool. All right. Well, we are out of time. Next time, I want to take a glance backwards because he's finally given us the commandment. Here in verse 23 of chapter 3, he's finally quoted the commandment, which arguably he could have done at the very beginning, right? And which I might have been tempted to do if I had been John. My starting point might have been, okay, folks, you're wondering, so you believe in Jesus, what happens now? Well, let's start from square one, okay? What commandment did Jesus give? He said, uh, believe in the name of his son, Jesus Christ, and love one another. Let's start from there, right? And in a sense, John does that. But what he does not do is give this to us, quote this to us. Um, so I want to go back. I want to start off by going back and looking through earlier references to the commandments so that we can understand and try to understand not only um, see how taking the commandment that's given here and kind of reading that backwards into it, right? Into those earlier references to the commandment that he hadn't yet said, see how that kind of informs these are and reshapes those earlier passages. But I also want to think a little bit about the question, what does he gain by waiting until now to quote it? Why not lead with it? Or rather, to put it in a way that can be answered, what is the effect of waiting until now to quote this at length? Um, and then I want to also be thinking about this two-part commandment and how it fits with what we've been seeing before. Um, and then who knows? Maybe we continue into where he goes from this because we get another big verse. Um, Sorry, I'm smiling because we get back to the participial construction. And the keeping of the commandments of him one abides in him, and he in him. Yeah. Oh my goodness. En auto menai kai autos en auto. Wow. That's even more confusing than the interlinear English. And the one keeping the commandments of him abides in that one. And that one abides in that one. Oh man. Whew. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, Scott, I agree. I mean, he's seriously buried the lead here, right? You'd think like, okay, we have one commandment, right? There's one thing we have to do. So let's can we be really clear on that, right? We think about the commandment and what it means, and then maybe we think about where that takes us, right? But um, but no, he waits until he's 60% of the way through the entire epistle. before he gives it to us. So why? All right. So those are the things we will think about next time. And then we will uh, look ahead into verse 24. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. I will see you guys next time. Bye now.